Okay, why don't we start? My name is Tom Malleson. I use they, them pronouns. I am the coordinator of the Real Utopias Project and one of the editors, along with Isabelle Ferreira and Joel Rogers, of the book that we are here celebrating today, Democratizing the Corporation, the Bicameral Firm, and Beyond. So I am extremely happy to welcome you all here today for this lovely event and celebration. So today is exciting. We're going to celebrate the publication of this latest volume of the Real Utopias Project, which continues the legacy of this series started by the wonderful Erik Olin Wright. I want to welcome you all here today. I want to welcome in particular the fantastic group of authors who contributed chapters to this book, and also a warm welcome to all the folks here who've helped make this book possible through various kinds of support, as well as all of you who've been involved in Real Utopias projects in the past or are interested in becoming involved in the future. So welcome, a hearty welcome to you all. Sahi, would you please move us to the second slide? Thanks. So the plan for today is to let you all hear a little bit about the book from the lead author, Isabelle Ferreira, as well as two of the contributors, Sanjay Pinto and Marc Fleurbaey. You'll also get to hear from Joel Rogers at the Havens Wright Center and Gustav Arrhenius from the Institute for Future Studies, both of whom have been vital supports for this project. I'll remind everyone about the Real Utopias project, and we also want to let you know about exciting plans for the future. Okay, so before I pass it on to Isabelle to get us started, let me just say a quick word about housekeeping. So we are in a Zoom webinar format. This is necessary to keep us safe from disruption from internet trolls. The downside is that it's harder for the audience to communicate. We do apologize for that. The chat function is closed, but you'll see that the Q&A function is open. So if at any times you have questions, please do put them in the Q&A, and Isabelle or myself will try to respond as efficaciously as possible, though please do have some patience with us. Also, if you would like to use closed captions, those are available at the bottom of your screen. Let me also just remind panelists to please keep your video and your microphone off when you're not talking. Thanks. Okay, so without further ado, let me pass it on to Isabelle Ferreira. So Isabelle is professor of sociology at the University of Louvain. She's a senior research fellow at the Harvard Center for Labor and a Just Economy, and also a visiting fellow at Oxford's Institute for Ethics in AI. As everyone in this room likely already knows, Isabelle is at the forefront of debates about economic democracy. She's the lead author of this volume and truly its heart and soul. Her brilliance has shaped every page. And on a personal note, let me just say that's been an absolute pleasure, as well as a really deep honor to work with her these last few years. She's not only a colleague, but she's become a friend, a comrade, and a constant source of inspiration. So thank you so much, Isabelle, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's been my pleasure, my honor to work with you and with Joel to shepherd this book. I will say a little more about that part next. But first, let me introduce the substance of the book by saying that we all know, I think, if we are here today, we all know that we live in a time of cascading crisis. And one of our critical problem is that enormously powerful companies have become some of the most important political entities of our time. Our societies are called democratic, but these large corporations are accountable to no one but a tiny number of major shareholders. This is a blatant contradiction and the root cause of so many contemporary problems. The solution is to deepen our commitment to our democratic ideals by democratizing the corporation. This diagnosis is grounded in the understanding that Erik Olin Wright defended, extending and deepening democracy. The democracy form the necessary movement of the democratic project. On deepening, democracy ceases to be a fruitful experiment when it stops to be a movement that seeks to translate more deeply its ideal into practices. Hence, we badly need the flourishing of innovations in the political sphere, such as participation and deliberation in a more inclusive manner, as we need sortition to redress the pathologies of elections. On the movement of extension now, democracy should not be viewed as an ideal limited to the so-called political sphere, but should pervade the whole so-called economy, and in particular, the private, as it's called, company. And that's where our book takes place. I met Erik at a conference in 2016 organized by my colleague, Philippe Van Parijs, who's here today with us. Thank you so much, Philippe, for being here. It means a lot to me. Erik heard me talk about economic bicameralism at that conference as the path to democratize corporations and invited me to anchor the next Real Utopias project on that proposal. It's been a wonderful collaboration. Erik put the best of his enthusiasm and intellectual support. He organized a seminar with his graduate students at the University of Wisconsin-Madison to help me get the maximum amount of critiques from every angle. He organized the funding for the conference. Then, a few weeks after I flew back from Madison, very unfortunately, Erik fell abruptly ill. Erik took, nevertheless, the care to pass over his leadership role to Tom, who brilliantly shepherded this book to this day. So sadly, Erik passed away at the end of January 2019, and we have missed him dearly. But we continued the work, assembled the conference panelists, then COVID hit, so we held the conference online, then lots of things happened, but let's make it short. Here we are. Today, this new book provides a realistic plan to have firms sharing power with their workers via a bicameral government structure. There is a history that drives us here. It is the history of workers seeking power to govern their lives. And it's the history of unionization and workers' collective rights, from collective bargaining to German codetermination at firm level to worker cooperatives. But the proposal is a real utopia because it gets us beyond that point of the existing world as we know it. It takes us further than what is known so far, as it offers a path toward the full democratization of firms, which has never been practiced yet. The proposal recognizes workers as labor investors in the firm, without whom there would be no production nor service, whatever the amount of capital would be injected in the economic endeavor, and thus grants workers a collective veto right, the same as what capital investors enjoy through the current corporate capitalist board. This is the key principle I learned from the study of democratic revolution. A real utopia, according to Erik, is a reform that is implementable today in the world as we know it, but is also structurally a game changer in that it changes radically the structure of capitalism. Economic bicameralism does this by ending capitalists' monopoly right to govern. The firm in the despotic fashion that it governs it today, what's been traditionally called exercising control. Economic bicameralism does not yet erode capitalist ownership in the sense of the ownership of capital. But it is a plan that leads us toward a fruitful transition of ownership through full ESOP plan, for instance, which will lead firms to become sound, democratically owned and governed firms. It is an ambitious plan, and support for the idea is growing. For instance, this is the philosophical principle that anchors the democratized principle of the Democratizing Work Manifesto, signed by thousands of scholars from around the globe during the first COVID lockdown. Zahi, could you please turn on to the next slide, please? So this is what you're going to see. This is the table of content. We have assembled a fantastic group of international experts to discuss the proposal from every angle. And I am extremely grateful to all of you, all of them, to have accepted to participate in the conference, then in the writing of this book. Thank you to all who got involved. And I've made this book possible, and Tom will review all of whom made that possible. So I'm going just to mention two people. The first one is Erik, for carrying us on his shoulders. And the second one is Tom, for carrying us to this day. Thank you so much. I hope you will enjoy this book. I look forward to conversations that together we will generate, because this is truly a collective endeavor. And I hope this book will be really instrumental in that journey. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Isabelle. That's lovely. Zahi, could I ask you to turn off the slides? So thanks again, Isabelle, for those words. I'm going to now pass it over to one of the authors, Sanjay Pinto. So Sanjay is a fellow at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and Cornell. So whenever you're ready, Sanjay, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Tom. Really thrilled to be here to celebrate this launch today. Congrats to Isabelle, my wonderful comrade, for her imaginative proposal. Really glad to be in the company of such great colleagues in this volume. And I'm happy to play a small part in carrying the torch lit by Erik Olin Wright, which is a light that we sorely need in the world right now. So I'm going to use the few minutes I have here to share 5 reasons why I think this volume is so timely and important. Number 1, in a context where across the globe, economic power is obscenely and increasingly concentrated in the hands of a few, we need bold visions for remaking the foundations of our economic life. While there's a fair bit of discussion about strengthening corporate governance and accountability from the outside, this volume takes on the democratic deficits that exist within firms. Doing so, as Isabelle points out, wouldn't just benefit workers. In all likelihood, it would also make these firms more accountable to the communities in which they sit. Second, we're in a moment right now where bold ideas could actually go somewhere. In fits and starts, neoliberalism is losing its grip. Clearly, however, it will not go down without a fight. And whether it gives way to democratic deepening across different arenas or a terrifying assortment of right-wing alternatives is very much up for grabs. Economic bicameralism is the kind of proposal that could meet the moment and help tilt the transition in a more progressive direction. Third, in the best tradition of Real Utopias, the vision set forth by Isabelle charts a path from where we are now to a radically more just and democratic future. An economy populated by worker cooperatives would be the ultimate ideal for Isabelle, and I think for many of us here today on this call. By bringing labor into parity with capital, economic bicameralism would represent an important step along the way. As Isabelle mentioned, it would take us beyond kind of the upper bound of worker democracy as it now exists at scale in the form of German-style co-determination. And I've seen the appeal of this kind of pragmatic orientation in my work with American unions that are looking to seed economic alternatives. For a set of leaders at a big healthcare union I work with here in New York City, forming worker cooperatives at scale is the North Star, but moving organized labor beyond its junior partner role would mark a huge and meaningful improvement. So fourth, apart from helping to confront class divides, democratizing the corporation could help to provide the kind of connective tissue that's needed to challenge white supremacy and other forms of racialized oppression. In my piece for this volume, I consider how attempts to expand voice at work must actively confront racial capitalism or risk reinforcing its many harms and exclusions. On the flip side, if we look at contemporary organizing currents here in the United States and elsewhere that are building worker power and multiracial solidarity in concert, how could democratic firms be a venue for challenging racism in the economy and in society more broadly? So this brings me then to my final proposition, which has to do with the potential political implications of deepening democracy in the economy, including within firms. Indeed, how might democratic engagement in the bridging of different social divides within firms shift the tenor of our toxic and polarized political discourse? Over time, how could distributing voice as well as ownership within firms transform the social contours of political power and who has influence over political decisions? In our current political environment, I think these prospects provide added reason to evangelize the idea of democratizing the corporation far and wide. Let's hope that in the future we can do another volume on the widespread and wide-ranging impacts of democratic firms out in the world. But for now, encourage folks to please buy this book. And with that, I will hand it back to Tom.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sanjay. Really appreciate it. Next, I'd like to invite Marc Fleurbaey to say a few words. So Marc is a professor at the Paris School of Economics and one of our contributing authors. Welcome, Marc.
Thank you, Tom. And congratulations indeed to the whole team, and especially to Isabelle for this beautiful book and for, yes, contributing to continuing the legacy of Erik, who started really this very nice series. And I also want to recognize not just the book, but also the movement that has really been assembled around Isabelle and other colleagues toward the democratizing the economy in general and the firm in particular. And it's very nice to see this mobilization, and I hope that this momentum around this idea will carry forward and will transform the world. In my few words here, I just would like to do three things. First, to talk about why this topic is important and why this book, therefore, is important, but also say a little bit about concrete aspects of why the management of the firm has a few dimensions that need to be transformed if we want to build a better world. And that requires transformation, not just outside the firm, but also within the firms. And finally, a few words about the organization of democracy within the firm. So why is it important? Why is workplace democracy important? I would say there are three main considerations. One is, first, it is important in terms of mere procedural justice and mere considerations of dignity for the people. As Isabelle said in the introduction, there is really a chasm between the ideal of democracy as it is not so well practiced in politics and as it is not essentially completely ignored in economics, right? And so this gap between the pretension of democracy in our societies and the lack of democracy in the life of people from the morning to the evening, their work time, which is quite essential, not just for their life, their daily routine, but also for their social status and for how they see themselves. This is really something that is unacceptable and has to be changed. So justice and dignity is the first main consideration. The second consideration is more instrumental. We need to move beyond the shareholder value principle. We need to have the economy oriented toward human development, broadly speaking. And there is something that is discussed around the firm more precisely, which is to move beyond shareholder value towards stakeholder value. And I think the discussion of workplace democracy is really instrumental, is moving toward that idea of firms pursuing a broader objective and an objective that is encompassing for a broader set of stakeholders. So that's something that can really change the decisions they make in various domains, and I will be more specific about that in a minute. And the third consideration I wanted to mention is that there are many spillovers. It's not just that people spend their day in their work, but that really shapes their life, shapes their values, shapes their attitudes, including as citizens. And it's well documented that when people do experience democratic procedures in various aspects of their life, including in their work, they become better citizens, they become more engaged, they become better people, simply. And this is something that is really to be recognized. So these are the main reasons. Now, let me be a bit more specific about how the management of firms has to be changed and why we are in trouble because of the way it is done. So there are, I would say, there are three dimensions that need to change when we move beyond the shareholder value principle. The first is the use and abuse of market power. The firms are using market power on the product side, their monopoly power, but also on the worker side, monopsony power. And that can be curbed by workplace democracy to some extent and by the stakeholder value principle, certainly. The second aspect of management of firms that has to be changed is the externalities that are generated by firms. So the firms try to externalize their cost, not just the environmental pollution and all that, but also the social consequences of their bad management. And these externalities need to be internalized in some way, and workplace democracy can contribute substantially. Of course, maybe not sufficiently. There are other policies, especially public policies, that can help. But nevertheless, some of these externalities, to some extent, can be cured a little bit by workplace democracy. And the second aspect is the question of non-contractable. So the dimensions of the firm's management that are like quality of product or working conditions that are not written in contracts, but are decided by the management of the firms. And when the firm is just pursuing profit in a shrewd way, in an unscrupuled way, then this is done in a way that is really squeezing consumers on one side and workers on the other side. So these are the three dimensions of management that need to be changed, and the stakeholder value approach can really help in changing that. And finally, in the final concrete discussion of the organization of the firm, I would like to say a few words about the bicameral principle. So Isabelle is pushing for this bicameral idea on the basis of the idea that the key internal stakeholders of the firm are the workers and the shareholders, and she's right. On the other hand, in my piece, I discuss the fact that other stakeholders like consumers and suppliers of the firm need to be taken into consideration, and that's especially true when we look at market power or product quality and this sort of thing. And so I think there is an interesting discussion to have around whether we need a bipartition of power in the firm or a tripartition where other stakeholders would also have their say in some form. So that's an interesting debate we may continue to have. And another consideration that is worth discussing is what is the mission of the people who are put around the table in the firm? Those who share in power, do they just have to push for the defense of their own interest, or could they be given a mission that would be a bit more specific? And what I have in mind is that if we look at what it means to pursue stakeholder value, we find that this implies certain very specific management principles, and maybe we could give a special mandate to the stakeholders who are associated to the decision bodies of the firm to check if these management principles are followed or not. And so that means that instead of just defending their interests, they would also have a sort of whistleblower role over specific guidelines that the firms would have to follow. So that's something that may help a little bit in transforming the clash of interest, especially between in the bicameral perspective, the clash of interest between different stakeholders may be transformed if we give them some guidance about what they should check in their participation in the governance of the firm. So let me stop here. Thank you for your attention, and congratulations again to Isabelle and the whole team who has been behind this beautiful book.
Thank you so much, Marc. That was great. So this volume had contributions from 16 different authors. We're not going to be able to hear from them all, but I do want to take a moment to acknowledge them. Their chapters are wonderful, and a big part of what makes this volume so special is the wisdom and the dialogue that emerges in the debates between these global experts. So let me warmly congratulate Carly Knight, Marc Fleurbaey, David Ellerman, Robert Freeland, Lenore Palladino, Max Krahé, Thomas Ferretti, Axel Gosseries, Simon Peck, Bo Rothstein, Chris Mackin, Ewan McGaughey, and Sanjay Pinto. Thank you so much, my friends. Congratulations to you all. So this project, really like all human endeavors, was only possible because of a broad infrastructure of care and support that enabled it. So in addition to the authors, I want to acknowledge the wonderful support that we've received over the years from Fred Block and his colleagues at Politics and Society Journal, Joel Rogers and colleagues at the Havens Wright Center for Social Justice, Gustav Arrhenius and colleagues at the Institute for Future Studies. Let me also acknowledge the people who have volunteered their time to sit on the advisory committee of the Real Utopias Project, as well as Asher and all the lovely editors working at Verso. So without all of this support, this project would never have come to fruition. So thanks very much to all of you. I want to now pass it over to Joel Rogers to say a few words. Joel is not only responsible for coming up with the name Real Utopias over 20 years ago, he's also the co-editor of this volume and is also the director of the Havens Wright Center. So all to say that he has been absolutely integral to this project from every degree and dimension. So a truly profuse and profound thank you to Joel. Joel, over to you.
Thank you, Tom. And I will be suitably brief. Let me just say it was really a delight working with you and Isabelle in editing all the fine contributions. And the contributors may disagree, but we wrangled you into text that we could actually understand and that we could live with. And I hope while respecting what you had to say. But the editorial process was a total gas, a total delight for me. Tom, I think Isabelle would accept this, was clearly leading that, but Isabelle and I, a distant third among the three of them, tried to contribute what we could. And anyway, it was a delightful process, and the conference was a joy too. So from the Haven Center point of view, whatever support we could offer in terms of organizing the money for the conference and other assistance to Verso in getting to actual publication was given joyfully. The importance of the volume is, I think, more or less straightforward, and I could just say what he said to both Sanjay and Marc, and maybe best leave it at that, or what they said. Was a great proposal, which is a very concrete, because it has been in some ways tried already in Germany, proposal. It sets the struggle for democracy's extension beyond the political sphere to which it's been unsuccessfully confined for a long time to the economic sphere. But this comes at a time when, as Sanjay noted, neoliberalism is generally now in retreat or declared dead. It was, I think, in early September of 1970, September 13th, 1970, to be precise. I just found the reference here, that Milton Friedman had a major article in the New York Times magazine section. And the title of the article was "The Social Responsibility of Business is to Increase Profits." And along with the Powell memo, that could be seen as a signal, get ready, world, ready or not, for an ascending neoliberalism of corporate dominance and degradation of our world. And that now it's 50 years after that, in early September, the New York Times had another article saying, is Milton Friedman, I'm trying to find you the title, has business left Milton Friedman behind? Well, I can assure the New York Times that business has not left Milton Friedman behind, but most of the world has now escaped the utter delusion that somehow unregulated markets, states unable to provide public goods, an fantastic worldwide increase in inequality. In the US case, $50 trillion transferred from the bottom 90% of the population to the top 5% over the period really the early 70s to the early 2000s, not 70 to 2020, but 75 to 2022. That has not made our world better and threatens now through some of the environmental degradation, not even to mention all the wars, threatens to make it uninhabitable. So Isabelle's volume comes at a great time. I'm particularly delighted with others to see it, in part through her fantastic energy and leadership, and let's admit it, charm, connected to a bunch of other social movements. Sanjay said as well that when you talk to union people now, yeah, they're open to talking about cooperatives, but this idea just seems like an easy, not to make it lighthearted, but an easy first step toward greater say in the management of their firms. So just count me as a big fan and a very grateful fan for this effort. To Tom and Isabelle in particular, as the people I worked with most closely, but to everyone else as well. And I'm over and out, Tom.
Thanks so much, Joel. Really appreciate your words. So the initial plan for this volume, set in motion by Erik, was to have our conference in Sweden at the Institute for Future Studies. Unfortunately, COVID prevented that, but the IFS managed the virtual conference for us, applied for funding on our behalf. So I want to extend a truly grateful thank you to them. So let me pass it over to the director of the Institute, Gustav Ferreras, to say a few words. Thanks, Gustav.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as you said, there was quite a number of stumbling blocks on the way. And really congratulations to Tom and Isabelle and Joel that we, in the end, succeeded in doing both the conference and now this fantastic book. I met Erik Olin Wright just a couple of years before he unfortunately passed away, and that's when the plans started for having this conference here, and I was very proud to host then the first Real Utopia conference outside North America. Then, of course, unfortunately, Erik passed away, and then we got the pandemic. But even though, and that's thanks to the work of Tom and Isabelle and Joel, we succeeded in having this fantastic conference online in actually quite early days on when you how to organize that kind of conference. And of course, the papers in the book, they come out of this conference. We should also thank Riksbankens Jubileumsfond, who generously funded this, and also with all these changes we had to make because of the pandemic that kicked in. It's a great book, but as many have said, it's also a very important book. I mean, to develop and deepen democracy by having economic democracy. As Isabelle mentioned, we live in dark times with cascading crisis, and clearly workplace democracy, economic democracy is one way of meeting that. Just to mention a few things, we know that big companies, very, very big companies, they finance wars and conflicts for profit, and it's not in line with the wills of those people who work in the companies. We can expect a different behavior if it was a company run democratically. We also have democratic backsliding. There's different way of trying to deal with that, but of course, an obvious way of dealing with it is to develop economic democracy in the workplace. We have, of course, climate change, and we know from empirical studies that actually companies that are run democratically behave better in this respect. And another disruption that happening is, of course, artificial intelligence, and we get enormous productivity gains. And as was mentioned by Joel, we have enormous inequalities. And this clearly would be a better distribution of those gains from productivity if we had economic democracy where people would share in the company of these profits. And then, of course, all that Marc mentioned, people spend most of their days under unacceptable totalitarian condition, which is the normal way a stock company is run. Economic democracy is about transforming democracy for a better future, moving away from the artificial constraints of democracy only applied to states, region, and similar things. The artificial division between political and economic democracy. Moving forward for a democracy for the future, developing democracy. And this book is a fantastic contribution to this aim, a very important contribution to the aim. So congratulations again to all the contributors. It will indeed be a very inspiring book for many to continue to do future research in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gustav. So appreciate it.